He said it in front of everyone. That was the part I kept returning to, later, when the incense had burned low and the house was quiet, and I sat alone at my husband's altar with nothing but the sound of the ceiling fan turning slow circles overhead. Not what he said, though the words themselves were sharp enough. It was the audience he chose: Gerald's wife, two neighbors from the alley, Lynn's old classmate who had stopped by to return a borrowed pot. Kevin stood in my own kitchen, in the house where I had taught him to wash rice, and he said it the way a man says something he has rehearsed. "Mom, you don't even know what a 401k is. Just sign where I tell you. The money's safer with someone who actually understands finances." He did not lower his voice. Stephanie was beside him. She wore a pale yellow blouse that day, silk or something meant to look like it, and she had the kind of smile that never quite reached the corners of her eyes. She touched Kevin's arm lightly when he finished, the way you touch someone to say, "Well done." I looked at my son. I looked at him the way I used to look at students who played a wrong note and knew it not with anger, just with the particular stillness of someone who has already heard the mistake, already understood it, and is deciding how much time to give it. Then I smiled. One side of my mouth, barely. I picked up the pen he had set on the table. I turned it once in my fingers. Then I set it back down without signing anything and said, "Let me make some tea first." Nobody in that kitchen understood what had just happened. I could see it on their faces, Gerald's wife nodding along, the neighbors half distracted by their own conversation, Lynn's classmate pretending to check her phone. They thought I was an old woman who needed a moment to understand the question. They thought the smile meant confusion, or agreement, or the gentle surrender of someone too tired to argue. Stephanie reached for the pen herself, ready to point again to the signature line. I was already at the stove. That afternoon feels far away now. But memory is not always about distance. I have lived in this house for 31 years. I know which floorboard creaks near the back bedroom. I know how the light falls through the kitchen window at 4 in the afternoon, yellow and specific, landing always on the corner of the counter where my husband used to keep his reading glasses. I know the smell of this house in every season, in the dry months when the dust settles on the altar cloth, in the rainy months when the wood swells in the door frames and everything smells faintly of earth. I retired from Westfield Elementary 6 years ago. 35 years teaching music to children who mostly did not want to learn it. Piano on Tuesdays, recorder for the third graders, and every spring the small agony of the school concert where 40 children played 40 slightly different versions of the same song at the same time. I loved every year of it. My husband Min died 4 years before I retired. Heart failure, early morning, while I was in the kitchen. He did not call out. He was considerate even in that. When Min died, I sat with the paperwork the way you sit with anything that cannot be rushed. The life insurance, the bank accounts, the 401k I had carried for 22 years through the school district. The forms asked for a beneficiary. I named Min first, as I always had. With Min gone, I went to the bank and I sat across from a man named Gerald Tran, Min's old friend, recently retired himself from the branch, and I signed a new form. Primary beneficiary, my daughter Lynn. The form went into the metal box I keep under the altar table, behind the photograph of Min at 43. The one where he is laughing at something off to the left and you can see the gap between his front teeth. I kept that box. I have always kept things. Kevin was not always the man who stood in my kitchen that afternoon. I remember him at 7, sitting on the tile floor of this same kitchen, picking out a melody on the small keyboard I had brought home from school. He had no patience for lessons, never wanted to practice scales, but he could hear a melody once and find it again with one hand, slowly, the way children touch things to understand them. I used to stand in the doorway and listen without letting him know I was there. I do not know when he stopped being that boy. I know when I first noticed he was gone. It was 8 months ago, when he began calling more regularly. Not the usual calls, brief, distracted, full of excuses. These were different, longer, warmer. He asked about my health. He asked whether the house needed any repairs. He started bringing Stephanie to Sunday dinners, and Stephanie always arrived with something fruit, once a small orchid in a plastic pot, once a box of mooncakes she said she had found at a specialty shop downtown. I am not a suspicious woman by nature. but I taught music for 35 years. I know when someone is playing a part they have memorized. Stephanie asked about the neighborhood once, in the particular way that was not really a question. How long have you lived here? And then, property values have gone up so much in this area, haven't they? She looked at the walls when she said it. Not at me. I answered about the neighborhood. I did not mention what I was listening for. The afternoon of the kitchen, the pen, the signature line, the silk blouse and the audience Kevin had gathered, I made tea and served it to everyone, and said very little for the rest of the visit. Kevin tried once more before he left. Just a routine update, Mom. The financial advisor recommended it. It protects you. I nodded. I saw them to the door. I watched their car turn out of the alley. Then I came inside and stood at my husband's altar for a long moment, looking at his photograph. The incense I had lit that morning was nearly gone, a thin line of smoke still rising from the holder, bending sideways in the draft from the window. There is an old saying I learned from my mother, who learned it from hers. Still, water does not mean shallow water. She said it to me when I was young and too quick to speak, too eager to show what I knew. She said it when I started teaching and worried that my students didn't respect me. She said it the year Min died and I did not cry at the funeral, and the neighbors whispered that I must not have loved him. I thought of it now. I looked at my husband's photograph. I looked at the metal box beneath it. Then I went to the kitchen to wash the teacups, slowly, without hurrying. I had time. The letter came on a Wednesday. I know it was Wednesday because I had just come back from the market, the one 3 blocks over where the woman at the vegetable stall still wraps things in newspaper, the old way, and I was standing at the kitchen counter unwrapping a bundle of water spinach when I heard the mail slot open and close. I dried my hands. I walked to the front door. I picked up the small stack from the floor the way I have done every day for 30 years. Most of it was the usual. A bill, a circular from a pharmacy, a postcard from the water company about maintenance work in the area, and then one envelope, white, with a return address I did not immediately recognize. The name in the upper left corner was not a bank I used. It was a financial services company, the kind of name that sounds like it was assembled from words meant to suggest trust and stability. Meridian Pacific Financial Services. I did not open it in the hallway. I carried it to the kitchen table, sat down, and looked at it for a moment the way you look at something before you decide what it is. The envelope was addressed to me. My full name, correct spelling, correct address. The postmark was from 4 days prior. I opened it. The letter was 1 page, printed cleanly, formal in the way of documents that want to appear routine. It thanked me for my recent request to update my beneficiary designation on my 401k retirement account through the Westfield Unified School District Employee Plan. It confirmed that the change had been processed. It listed the new primary beneficiary, Kevin Lan Nguyen. I read the line twice. Then I read the entire letter from the beginning. I had made no such request. I sat at that table for a long time. The water spinach was still on the counter. The ceiling fan turned. Outside, someone in the alley was talking on a phone, the voice coming and going with the wind. I thought about what I knew and what I did not know. What I knew. I had not contacted Meridian Pacific Financial Services. I had not filled out any form. I had not signed anything related to my 401k in years, not since the afternoon Gerald Tran sat at this same table and witnessed my signature on the updated form after Min died. That form named Lynn. What I did not know, how this had happened, when, what had been submitted in my name, what I suspected. I kept that thought at the edge and did not look at it directly. Not yet. I folded the letter along its original crease. I put it back in the envelope. I carried it to the altar room and set it on the small table beside the incense holder, next to Min's photograph, where I put things that require more thought than I currently have to give them. Then I went back to the kitchen and finished cooking. I did not call Kevin that evening. This is the part people would not understand, perhaps. Any other person might have called, immediately demanded an explanation, raised her voice, done the thing that feels like action. I have learned, over 68 years, that the thing that feels like action is not always the thing that produces clarity. A raised voice tells the other person what you know and what you feel and what you are afraid of, all at once, before you have gathered anything useful. My husband used to say, The fish that jumps out of the water thinking it can breathe air does not survive long enough to learn its mistake. I ate my dinner. I washed the dishes. I sat at the piano for 20 minutes and played nothing in particular, just scales, just the mechanical comfort of my hands knowing what to do. After the children were grown and the house was quieter, I used to play for Min in the evenings. Not performances, just the hour after dinner, whatever I felt like. He would read. Sometimes he fell asleep in the chair, and I would finish the piece anyway, for myself or for the house. Music does not require an audience to be real. That night I played a little longer than usual. Then I stopped. I took the letter to my desk and read it a third time. The account number on the letter matched my own. My name was correctly listed as the account holder. The effective date of the change was listed as 11 days prior, a Tuesday, I calculated. Kevin and Stephanie had visited the Sunday before that. They had stayed for dinner. Kevin had asked, again, about the financial advisor. About restructuring. About how complicated these things could get when documents were out of date. I had nodded. I had served more food. The Sunday before the effective date. I pulled out my reading glasses and looked at the signature line at the bottom of the letter. It confirmed that the update had been processed per the account holder's written authorization. Written authorization. Someone had submitted a form. A form with my name on it, my account number, my address. I turned the letter over, looking for a phone number. There was a customer service line printed in small type at the bottom. I wrote it on the notepad I keep by the telephone. Then I wrote the account number. Then I wrote the effective date. Then I opened the drawer of my desk, where I keep the documents I use regularly, not the metal box under the altar, which holds the originals, but the working folder where I keep copies. I found the copy of the 401k beneficiary form from 2019. Lynn's name in the primary line, written in my own hand. Gerald Tran's witness signature beside mine. I set the copy next to the letter. I looked at both documents for a long time. Outside, the evening had settled into the particular quiet of a neighborhood after dinner, when everyone is inside and the street sounds fade and the only thing you can hear is the small sounds of the house itself. The refrigerator, the ceiling fan, the thin thread of wind through the crooked kitchen window Min never properly fixed. I had two documents now. One said one thing, one said another. Only one of them was mine. I put both documents in the envelope, closed it, and placed it back beside the altar. I did not call the customer service number that night. I needed to think before I spoke to anyone. I needed to understand the full shape of what I was looking at before I let anyone know I was looking at it at all. But I knew this much. Something had moved in my house without asking permission. And whatever had moved, it was still pretending it hadn't. The letter came on a Wednesday. I know it was Wednesday because I had just come back from the market. The one 3 blocks over where the woman at the vegetable stall still wraps things in newspaper the old way, and I was standing at the kitchen counter, unwrapping a bundle of water spinach, when I heard the mail slot open and close. I dried my hands. I walked to the front door. I picked up the small stack from the floor the way I have done every day for 30 years. Most of it was the usual. A bill, a circular from a pharmacy, a postcard from the water company about maintenance work in the area, and then one envelope, white, with a return address I did not immediately recognize. The name in the upper left corner was not a bank I used. It was a financial services company, the kind of name that sounds like it was assembled from words meant to suggest trust and stability. Meridian Pacific Financial Services. I did not open it in the hallway. I carried it to the kitchen table, sat down, and looked at it for a moment the way you look at something before you decide what it is. The envelope was addressed to me, my full name, correct spelling, correct address. The postmark was from 4 days prior. I opened it. The letter was 1 page, printed cleanly. Formal in the way of documents that want to appear routine. It thanked me for my recent request to update my beneficiary designation on my 401k retirement account through the Westfield Unified School District Employee Plan. It confirmed that the change had been processed. It listed the new primary beneficiary, Kevin Lan Nguyen. I read the line twice, then I read the entire letter from the beginning. I had made no such request. I sat at that table for a long time. The water spinach was still on the counter. The ceiling fan turned. Outside, Someone in the alley was talking on a phone, the voice coming and going with the wind. I thought about what I knew and what I did not know. What I knew, I had not contacted Meridian Pacific Financial Services. I had not filled out any form. I had not signed anything related to my 401k in years, not since the afternoon Gerald Tran sat at this same table and witnessed my signature on the updated form after Min died. That form named Lin. What I did not know. How this had happened. When. What had been submitted in my name. What I suspected. I kept that thought at the edge, and did not look at it directly. Not yet. I folded the letter along its original crease. I put it back in the envelope. I carried it to the altar room and set it on the small table beside the incense holder, next to Min's photograph, where I put things that require more thought than I currently have to give them. Then, I went back to the kitchen and finished cooking. I did not call Kevin that evening. This is the part people would not understand, perhaps. Any other person might have called, immediately demanded an explanation, raised her voice, done the thing that feels like action. I have learned, over 68 years, that the thing that feels like action is not always the thing that produces clarity. A raised voice tells the other person what you know and what you feel and what you are afraid of, all at once, before you have gathered anything useful. My husband used to say, "The fish that jumps out of the water thinking it can breathe air does not survive long enough to learn its mistake." I ate my dinner. I washed the dishes. I sat at the piano for 20 minutes and played nothing in particular, just scales, just the mechanical comfort of my hands knowing what to do. After the children were grown, and the house was quieter, I used to play for Min in the evenings. Not performances, just the hour after dinner, whatever I felt like. He would read. Sometimes he fell asleep in the chair, and I would finish the piece anyway, for myself or for the house. Music does not require an audience to be real. That night I played a little longer than usual. Then I stopped. I took the letter to my desk and read it a third time. The account number on the letter matched my own. My name was correctly listed as the account holder. The effective date of the change was listed as 11 days prior, a Tuesday, I calculated. Kevin and Stephanie had visited the Sunday before that. They had stayed for dinner. Kevin had asked, again, about the financial advisor, about restructuring, about how complicated these things could get when documents were out of date. I had nodded. I had served more food. The Sunday before the effective date. I pulled out my reading glasses and looked at the signature line at the bottom of the letter. It confirmed that the update had been processed per the account holder's written authorization. Written authorization. Someone had submitted a form with my name on it, my account number, my address. I turned the letter over, looking for a phone number. There was a customer service line printed in small type at the bottom. I wrote it on the notepad I keep by the telephone. Then I wrote the account number. Then I wrote the effective date. Then I opened the drawer of my desk where I keep the documents I use regularly, not the metal box under the altar, which holds the originals, but the working folder where I keep copies. I found the copy of the 401k beneficiary form from 2019. Lin's name in the primary line, written in my own hand. Gerald Tran's witness signature beside mine. I set the copy next to the letter. I looked at both documents for a long time. Outside, the evening had settled into the particular quiet of a neighborhood after dinner, when everyone is inside and the street sounds fade, and the only thing you can hear is the small sounds of the house itself. The refrigerator. The ceiling fan. The thin thread of wind through the crooked kitchen window Min never properly fixed. I had two documents now. One said one thing, one said another. Only one of them was mine. I put both documents in the envelope, closed it, and placed it back beside the altar. I did not call the customer service number that night. I needed to think before I spoke to anyone. I needed to understand the full shape of what I was looking at before I let anyone know I was looking at it at all. But I knew this much. Something had moved in my house without asking permission. And whatever had moved, it was still pretending it hadn't. I called the number on a Thursday morning, after breakfast, when my mind was clearest. I had waited 2 days. Not from fear, from preparation. There is a difference between a woman who delays because she does not know what to do, and a woman who waits because she is deciding exactly how to do it. I spent those 2 days thinking about what I needed to learn and what I could not afford to reveal. I practiced the conversation the way I used to practice a difficult passage before a recital, slowly, carefully, until the movements became natural enough that I could perform them without thinking about performing them. At 9 in the morning, I sat at my desk with the letter in front of me, the notepad beside it, and a cup of tea I would not finish. I dialed the customer service number. The woman who answered had a pleasant voice, efficient, the kind of voice trained to be neither warm nor cold. She asked for my account number. I gave it. She asked me to verify my address and date of birth. I verified both. Then she asked how she could help me today. I told her I had received a letter confirming a beneficiary change on my account. I told her I wanted to verify the details of that change. A pause. Keyboard sounds. Then, yes, she confirmed. A beneficiary designation update had been processed on my account. The new primary beneficiary was listed as Lan Nguyen. The change had been submitted via a standard written authorization form, received by their office 11 days ago. I asked her to describe the form. Another pause. She said it was a standard beneficiary designation update form, completed and signed by the account holder. She said it had been submitted by mail. I asked whether she could tell me anything about the signature verification process, how they confirmed the form had been signed by the account holder and not by someone else. A longer pause this time. She said their standard process involved matching the signature on the submitted form against the signature on file from the original account enrollment. She said if the signatures matched sufficiently, the change was processed. I wrote that down. Sufficiently. I thanked her. I asked whether I could request a copy of the submitted form, the one with the signature they had matched against my file. She said I could submit a written request. She gave me an address. I wrote that down too. Then I thanked her again and said goodbye. I sat for a while after the call, looking at my notepad. Submitted by mail, signed by the account holder, or by someone whose imitation of the account holder's signature was sufficient, processed without a phone call, without an identity verification beyond the written signature, without anyone calling me to confirm that I had, in fact, decided to change the beneficiary of my retirement account from my daughter's name to my son's. I thought about the Sunday dinner 2 weeks before the effective date. Kevin at my table, asking about the financial advisor, about restructuring, about how things could get complicated when paperwork was out of date. Stephanie beside him with her careful smile, and her eyes that moved around the room when she thought I wasn't watching. I thought about what documents Kevin might have seen during his visits, pay stubs I had left on the counter, the folder in my desk drawer with account copies. He knew the name of the school district. He had grown up watching me work for it. He had my handwriting on cards he had kept for years. Birthday cards. Notes in lunchboxes when he was small. A letter I wrote him when he moved into his first apartment, telling him to eat properly and call his grandmother. I did not let the thought become a conclusion. Not yet. A conclusion drawn too early is a door closed before you have seen all the rooms. But I opened my desk drawer and took out the copy of the original beneficiary form, the one Gerald had witnessed, the one naming Lynn. I looked at my own signature at the bottom of the page, the way I write the L in Lan, with that slight upward curve at the end that I developed in my 20s and have never been able to correct. The way the N in Nguyen runs into the next letter because I write quickly and always have. A signature is not just a name. It is a habit of the hand. It is 30 years of muscle memory, of the specific pressure you apply, the specific angle of your wrist, the specific places where your pen lifts and returns. You can copy the shape of someone's signature if you have studied it long enough, but the habits underneath those are harder to replicate perfectly. Sufficiently, the woman had said. I wrote the letter requesting the copy of the submitted form that same afternoon. I wrote it carefully, formally, exactly as a woman who simply wants to verify her own records would write it. No accusation. No alarm. Just a reasonable request from a retired school teacher who likes to keep her paperwork in order. I addressed it, stamped it, and walked to the postbox at the corner before I changed my mind about the wording. On the way back, I passed the marigolds along the back fence, which needed water. I stood there with the hose for a few minutes, thinking about nothing in particular, which is what I do when I am actually thinking very hard about something specific. The copy would take time. A week. Perhaps 2. I would wait. In the meantime, I needed to understand the shape of the problem more clearly. I needed to know not just what had been done but how far it had gone. The 401k was one account. I had others. Smaller, but mine. I had the house. I had the policy on the house. I had the small savings account Min, and I had opened together in 1998, which I had continued under my name alone, which contained a modest amount that would not impress anyone at a financial planning firm, but was real and was mine. I had not checked those accounts in several months. I trusted them the way you trust a locked drawer, not because you verify it every day, but because you locked it yourself and no one else has the key. That evening, after dinner, I opened my laptop and logged into the online portal for the savings account. It took me a few tries to remember the password. I have a system for passwords that Lynn set up for me 2 years ago. A small notebook in the second drawer of my desk. The balance was correct. The account history was ordinary. I checked the beneficiary designation on the savings account. I stared at the screen for a long moment. Then I reached for my reading glasses and looked again, more closely, because I needed to be certain I was reading what I thought I was reading. The primary beneficiary on the savings account had also been changed. The effective date was 6 days before the 401k, and the name listed was not Kevin's. The name on the savings account was Stephanie Marsh. Not Kevin. Not a relative. Not a name I recognized from any document I had ever signed or any conversation I could remember having. Stephanie Marsh, listed as primary beneficiary on the savings account, Min and I had opened together in 1998. The account I had continued in my name alone. The account I had not looked at in 4 months, because I trusted it the way you trust a thing you built yourself. I sat at my desk for a long time without moving. The laptop screen dimmed, then went dark from inactivity. I did not touch it. Outside, the neighbor's dog barked twice, and then was quiet. The ceiling fan turned. The thin thread of wind came through the kitchen window the way it always does when the evening cools, and I heard it the way I always hear it, a small, familiar sound that belongs to this house, to this life, to 31 years of evenings that did not feel like this one. I moved the cursor. The screen came back. I read the name again. Stephanie Marsh. Effective date, 17 days ago. 3 days before Kevin and Stephanie had come for Sunday dinner. 3 days before Kevin had sat at my table and said, again, in his patient and increasingly rehearsed way, that he had spoken to the financial advisor about restructuring. That things could get complicated. That documents became outdated and caused problems for families during difficult times. I thought about Stephanie at my kitchen table, eating the food I cooked, asking about the neighborhood in a way that was not really asking about the neighborhood. I thought about her eyes moving along the walls. I thought about the cream blouse, the silk or almost silk, and the careful neutral expression she had arranged on her face when she looked at Min's altar. I thought about what she would have needed to make this change. My account number, my personal information, my signature, or something close enough to it. I closed the laptop. I did not close it because I had finished thinking. I closed it because I needed to think without looking at the screen, and sometimes the mind works better in the dark. I went to the altar room. This is what I do when something is too large to hold at a desk. I go to the room where Min's photograph sits, where the brass incense holder has stood since his mother gave it to us, where the air carries the faint residue of every stick of incense I have burned in 20 years of mornings. There is no logic to it. I am not a superstitious woman, but there is something about standing in that room, in front of that photograph, that organizes my thoughts in a way that nothing else quite does. I lit a stick of incense. I watched the smoke rise and bend. Min looked back at me from the photograph, patient as always, the gap between his front teeth visible in his half-smile, his eyes directed slightly off to the left toward whatever had made him laugh that afternoon, in 1989, when Lynn took the picture without telling him. I told him what I had found. Not out loud, I am not the kind of woman who speaks aloud to photographs, but I told him in the way you tell someone you have known for 40 years, without needing words, just the deliberate act of standing in front of them and letting them know you are here, and this is what is happening. 2 accounts, 2 beneficiary changes, both made without my knowledge, both within days of each other, one in Kevin's name, one in Stephanie's. My retirement account and our savings account, the 2 largest things I owned that could be transferred without transferring the house. I thought about the house. I went back to my desk. I found the folder where I keep the documents related to the house, the deed, the property tax records, the homeowner's insurance policy. I had not looked at these in over a year. The house was paid off. The deed was in my name. There was nothing to update, nothing to change, nothing that required attention. I opened the folder. The deed was there. Correct. My name, the address, the property description. I looked at it carefully, the way I had looked at the beneficiary letter, reading each line. Then I checked the insurance policy. The policy was current. The coverage amounts were unchanged. The property address was correct. I was about to close the folder when something made me look again at the emergency contact section, a field I had filled out years ago and never thought about since. In the event of a claim requiring on-site coordination, the policy asked for a secondary contact person. I had listed Lynn. I remembered filling it in. Lan Nguyen, her phone number, her relationship to the account holder, daughter. The field now listed a different name, a different phone number. I did not recognize the number, but I recognized the name. I sat very still. Kevin had access to my insurance portal. I had asked him, 8 months ago, to help me when the website changed its login system and I could not find the new password. He had sat at this desk, at this computer, and navigated the new portal while I watched. I had thought nothing of it. He was my son. I was showing him where things were in case something happened to me. That is what mothers do. I had watched him log in. I had not watched him log out. I reached for my notepad. I wrote down both names, both effective dates, both account types, the insurance contact field. I drew a line connecting the dates. They formed a sequence, not random changes made in a moment of opportunity, but a progression, each one made within days of the last, each one extending the reach a little further. Someone had been moving through my financial life, the way water moves through a house with a slow leak quietly, along the lowest paths, finding every opening, settling into every space that was not sealed. I put down the pen. I thought about the metal box under the altar, the original form inside it, the form Gerald Tran had witnessed with his own hand, his own signature, his own presence at this kitchen table on a Saturday afternoon while Lynn practiced piano badly in the back room. Kevin did not know about that box. I had never told him. He had never asked. Whatever had been submitted to Meridian Pacific Financial Services in my name, it was not that form. It could not be that form. That form had never left this house, which meant that somewhere, in someone's possession, there was a document with my name on it, my account number, my forged signature, authorizing a change I had never made. I needed to see it. I needed to hold it next to the original and let the difference speak for itself, clearly, in front of someone who could not be argued with, someone who had been in this room, at this table, and knew exactly what my signature looked like on the day it was real. I picked up my phone. I found Gerald Tran's number in my contacts. It was late. Too late to call. I put the phone down. I would call him in the morning, before I lost the particular cold clarity I had right now, before sleep softened the edges of what I was seeing. But as I stood to go to bed, my phone screen lit up on the desk. A text message, unknown number. 4 words. We need to talk. I did not answer the text message that night. I looked at it for a long time, 4 words on a lit screen in a dark room. No name attached, no context offered. We need to talk. The kind of message designed to create urgency in the person who receives it, to make them reach back immediately, to put them off balance before the conversation even begins. I had seen this kind of pressure before, in smaller forms. Parents at school conferences who arrived having already decided the outcome, who opened with something alarming so that the rest of the meeting moved on their terms. I set the phone face down on the desk. If someone wanted to talk to me badly enough, they would find another way. And when they did, I intended to be ready. I called Gerald at 8 the next morning. He answered on the second ring, the way he always has for as long as I have known him, promptly, without fuss, as though he had been expecting the call. We exchanged the brief courtesies of people who have known each other long enough that the courtesies are genuine rather than performed. His wife's knee, my garden, the weather, which had been unreasonable. Then I told him I needed his help with something, and that I would prefer to explain in person. He said, "Come for lunch, 12 o'clock. His wife was visiting their daughter in Da Nang for the week, and he had been eating poorly. I said I would bring food. Gerald Tran's house is 15 minutes from mine by motorbike. in a quiet street where the trees have grown large enough to arch over the road and make a kind of corridor of shade in the afternoons. He has lived there for 22 years. The house is tidy in the particular way of a man who was an administrator for 30 years. Everything has a place. The place is logical, and deviations from the system are corrected promptly. I arrived at noon with a container of braised pork and a bag of rice. He met me at the door. We sat at his kitchen table, which is smaller than mine and made of darker wood, and we ate before I said anything important. This is also the way of people who have known each other long enough. You feed the body before you ask anything difficult of the mind. When the bowls were cleared, I put the folder on the table. I showed him the letter from Meridian Pacific Financial Services. I showed him the screenshot I had taken of the savings account beneficiary page. I showed him the insurance policy contact field. I laid them out in order, the way I had laid them out in my mind the night before, from earliest to most recent, so that the sequence was visible. Gerald looked at each document without speaking. He is the kind of man who reads carefully and completely before forming an opinion. I have always respected this about him. He put on his reading glasses for the letter, took them off again for the screenshots, turned the insurance page toward the window to see it in better light. When he had finished, he looked at me. I asked him, "Do you still have the personal copy of the witness form you kept after we updated the beneficiary in 2019? He said, "I keep copies of everything. Old habit." He stood, went to the study at the back of the house, and returned 3 minutes later with a manila folder. He found the page. He laid it on the table beside the Meridian letter. His signature, mine, the date, Lin's name in the beneficiary line. He tapped the Meridian letter with one finger. "This was not submitted by you." I said, "I know. I need you to be willing to say that. In a room in front of people, if it comes to that." He said, "I witnessed your signature. I know what it looks like. I know the date, and I know what you told me that afternoon. I will say it anywhere you need me to say it." I folded the documents back into the folder. My mother used to say that still water does not mean shallow water. I had thought of this in my own kitchen the night I first received the Meridian letter. I thought of it again now, sitting across from Gerald in the afternoon light coming through his kitchen window, with a folder full of evidence and a witness who remembered everything. Still water. Deep water. Water that had been waiting for a long time to show what it was. On the way home, I stopped at the internet cafe on the corner near the market, the one run by a young man named Fook, who has been there for 10 years and who once helped me recover a document I had accidentally deleted and has been unfailingly kind to me ever since. I asked him for a private terminal in the back. He asked no questions. I spent 40 minutes logged in to every financial portal I had access to. Checking, documenting. I had brought a small notebook and I wrote down every account, every beneficiary field, every contact field, every place where a name could be inserted. 3 accounts had been altered. 1 had not. The original 401k account itself, through the school district's pension administrator, which used a separate system from Meridian and required a different form entirely. The pension administrator was an older institution, less streamlined, the kind that still mailed paper confirmations and required forms to be notarized rather than simply signed. Whoever had done this had not reached that account yet, or had not known about it. I sat with that thought for a moment. Then I logged out, thanked Fook, and went home. The text message was still on my phone, unanswered. 2 days old now. No follow-up had come, which told me something. Whoever had sent it was waiting for me to move first. They wanted to see whether I would reach out. Whether I was confused or frightened. Whether I could be directed. I would not reach out. Instead, I wrote 3 letters that evening at my desk. The first was to the Meridian Pacific Financial Services Compliance Department, formally disputing the beneficiary change and requesting a copy of the submitted authorization form under my right as the account holder. The second was to the savings bank, disputing the change to that account and requesting the same. The third was to my homeowner's insurance company, requesting a review of any recent changes to the policy contact fields. Each letter was polite. Each letter was precise. Each letter gave nothing away about what I knew or how I knew it. I sealed and addressed all 3 envelopes. I would mail them in the morning, from the post box 3 streets over, rather than the one at my corner. A small precaution, perhaps unnecessary, but I had learned something in 68 years. When you are not certain who is watching, you move as though someone is. That evening, before bed, I opened my laptop one more time to check an account. I had nearly forgotten a small certificate of deposit I had opened in 2017, a 3-year term that had rolled over automatically twice. Small enough to overlook. Small enough that whoever had been moving through my accounts might have missed it. They had not missed it. But what I found when I opened the account details was not another changed beneficiary. It was a withdrawal. Partial. Dated 9 days ago. In an amount just below the threshold that would have triggered an automatic bank notification. Someone had taken money. Not a name on a form this time. Actual money, already gone. They came on a Saturday morning without calling first. I was in the garden when I heard the gate. Still in my house clothes, hands in the soil, dealing with the marigolds along the back fence that had begun to sprawl in a direction I had not intended. I heard the latch, then footsteps on the stone path, and then Kevin's voice not calling out to announce himself the way a person does when they are a guest, but talking, mid-sentence, to someone behind him, as though he had simply continued a conversation from the car into my garden. I stayed where I was. I did not stand up immediately. I pressed the soil around the base of the nearest plant, and took one quiet breath, and then I stood and turned, slowly, the way I always move when I want to see something clearly before it sees me preparing. Kevin was dressed well, not for a casual visit for something. Pressed shirt, good shoes. Stephanie beside him in a pale green dress I had not seen before, her hair arranged, a folder tucked under her arm. Not a gift, not food, a folder. Behind them, a man I did not know. He was perhaps 50, carrying a soft leather briefcase, wearing the particular expression of someone who has been to many houses on many Saturdays and considers himself immune to the emotions of the people inside them. Mom. Kevin came toward me with his arms slightly open, the gesture of a hug that stops short of being one. You look tired. Have you been sleeping? I said I had slept well. I said I would go inside and wash my hands. He said there was no need. He said this wouldn't take long. They arranged themselves in my living room without being invited to sit. The man with the briefcase settled into Min's chair, the one beside the window, the one I had not reupholstered because the fabric still held the shape of 30 years of evenings, and opened his case on his knees with the efficiency of a man billing by the hour. Kevin stood near the bookshelf with his arms crossed in a way that was meant to look relaxed and did not. Stephanie sat on the couch and set the folder on the cushion beside her and placed her hand on top of it. I sat in my own chair across from them and folded my hands in my lap. The man introduced himself. Financial consultant. He said the name of his firm, which I did not recognize, and he said he had been working with Kevin for some months on estate planning strategies for aging family members. He said aging family members with the careful neutrality of a word chosen to avoid a more direct one. Kevin said, Dad would have wanted us to take care of things properly. I looked at him when he said this. I kept my face still. I had been keeping my face still for 68 years, and I was very good at it by now. Stephanie opened the folder. Inside were documents, multiple pages, paper-clipped in sections. She set them on the low table in front of me and leaned forward slightly, pointing to the first page with one finger and her careful smile. She explained what they were. A power of attorney document, drafted, she said, by a proper legal firm, authorizing Kevin as my financial decision-maker in matters of estate management and account administration. A companion document transferring management authority of the house to a family trust, Kevin and Stephanie, as co-trustees for the purposes of, she used a phrase I recognized from real estate listings, asset protection, and simplified transfer upon death. Upon death. She said it the way you say a thing you have decided no longer needs softening. Kevin said, It's standard, Mom. Everyone does this eventually. You're getting older, and these things should be in place before there's a crisis. The consultant nodded, looking at his own papers. I looked at the documents on the table. I did not touch them. Stephanie pushed them slightly closer to me. She had a pen already out. Silver, expensive looking, the kind bought to close transactions. She held it in her right hand, not extending it yet, but visibly ready. The message of the pen was clear. This is a formality. This is already decided. You are the last step. I asked if I could read the documents before signing. Kevin said of course, but they had already reviewed everything with the consultant and it was all very standard and there was no fine print to worry about. just the essential forms to get everything organized properly. I said I understood that, but I preferred to read things myself. A brief pause. The kind of pause that contains an entire conversation that no one says aloud. Stephanie said, "Take all the time you need. But the consultant has 3 other appointments today and it would help to finish while he's here, since his notarization is required for the forms to be valid." I looked at the consultant. He looked back at me with the expression of a man who sits in many living rooms and watches many old women sign many documents and goes home to his own dinner at a predictable hour. I said I would need more than a few minutes. Kevin sat down then, on the arm of the couch, in the way of a man deciding to wait out a delay rather than accommodate a request. His jaw was set. He looked like a version of himself I had not seen before, or perhaps a version I had seen once, briefly, years ago, when he was 19, and I had told him no about something he had already decided to do, and he had looked at me with the particular anger of someone who believes the answer should already have been different. He said, more quietly, "Mom, we're trying to help you. The accounts are already being managed. The house is the last piece. This just formalizes what's practical. The accounts are already being managed." He said it without catching himself. Stephanie's hand moved slightly on the folder, a small involuntary adjustment, and she looked at Kevin with the edge of an expression that disappeared before it fully formed. The consultant looked at his briefcase. I looked at my hands folded in my lap. Outside the window, the marigolds moved in the breeze, orange and unhurried. Min had planted the first ones along the fence because I had admired them somewhere, a street or a garden I could no longer remember, and he had simply appeared one afternoon with a seedling and put it in the ground without making anything of it. That was the whole of the story. And now they bloomed every year without needing to be told to. I said, "I will read the documents this week. You can leave them with me." Kevin stood. His voice was controlled, but the control was doing visible work. He said, "We'd really prefer to finalize this today." I said, "I'm sure you would." The room was very quiet. Stephanie's pen was still in her hand. The consultant's briefcase was still open. Kevin was standing in the middle of my living room with his arms no longer even attempting to look relaxed, looking at me the way someone looks at a door that should have opened by now and has not, and for the first time in all of this I could see, very clearly, that he had not once considered the possibility that I would not sign. He had come here this morning already finished, and I had not yet begun. Lynn called on a Sunday evening, which was not unusual. What was unusual was that she called 3 times in a row, each call beginning before the previous one had gone fully to voicemail. By the 3rd ring of the 3rd call, I was already at my desk with the phone in my hand, and when I answered I heard something in her voice that I had not heard since the morning I called to tell her that her father was gone. "Mom." She said it once, and then she stopped, and the silence between that single word and whatever came next was the kind of silence that takes up more space than sound. I said, "I'm here, tell me slowly." She was in her apartment in Oregon. She had been home for the weekend 2 weeks prior, a brief visit, unannounced, the way Lynn sometimes appeared when her schedule allowed, and she did not want to make a production of it. She had arrived on a Friday afternoon to find Kevin and Stephanie at the house, laptops open at the kitchen table, Kevin asking me to help him find an old document in my email account. She had stayed one night. Kevin had left his laptop charging in the back bedroom when he and Stephanie went out for dinner that evening. She had not meant to open it. She had picked it up in the dark, thinking it was her own. The chargers were the same model, and when the screen came on, it was already unlocked and already open to an email thread. She had meant to put it down immediately, but she had seen my name in the subject line. She read me the subject line over the phone. I wrote it down on the notepad beside my desk, pressing harder than necessary. Subject, Lan Nguyen, final asset summary before Q3 transfer. The thread was between Kevin and Stephanie, 17 messages over 6 weeks. Lynn had photographed every screen with her phone before she put the laptop back on the charger and went to bed and lay awake until 4 in the morning deciding what to do. She had waited 2 weeks before calling me. I asked her why she had waited. She said, "I needed to be certain. I needed to read everything again from the beginning. I needed to make sure I was not misunderstanding something that had an innocent explanation." She paused. "There is no innocent explanation." I said, "Tell me what the messages say." She told me. I will not record every detail here, because some things do not need to be preserved in full to be understood completely. What the messages said, taken together, across 17 exchanges, was this. Kevin had identified the total value of what I owned: the 401k, the savings accounts, the certificate of deposit, the house and its current market valuation, and had shared the figures with Stephanie in the first message in the thread, written with the brisk efficiency of a man presenting a business opportunity. The figure he listed was specific, more specific than anything he could have arrived at through guesswork. He had been inside my accounts. He had been inside them for longer than I had known. The subsequent messages discussed strategy. Which accounts to change first? Which changes were least likely to trigger bank notification systems? The savings account had been Stephanie's suggestion. She had pointed out that beneficiary changes on smaller accounts rarely generated immediate alerts to the primary account holder, unlike retirement accounts with their institutional oversight. She had been thorough in her reasoning. She laid it out clearly, in writing, in her own name, from her own email address. There were messages about the power of attorney documents. Kevin had paid for them himself. She had not known this until Lynn told me, and the email that described the payment referred to them as the final piece. Once Mom signs, he had written, the house is accessible within 60 days of transfer to the trust. Accessible. That was the word he had used for the house where I had made his school lunches, for the kitchen where I had taught him to wash rice, for the altar room where his father's photograph had sat for 4 years, looking slightly to the left, towards something that had made him laugh. Accessible within 60 days. And then the message that Lynn read last, her voice going very quiet, the message sent 3 days before Kevin and Stephanie arrived on that Saturday morning with the consultant and the silver pen. Kevin had written, she'll sign, she doesn't know enough to refuse. Stephanie had replied with 3 words, she never does. I sat at my desk after the call and I did not move for a long time. The incense on the altar had gone cold. The ceiling fan turned. The thread of wind came through Min's crooked window and moved the curtain slightly, the way it always did, the way it had done for 22 years since Min had replaced the frame himself on a Saturday afternoon and come in afterward with sawdust on his shirt and declared it finished. She never does. I thought about every Sunday dinner I had made, every plate I had set in front of Stephanie with her silk blouses and her careful smile, every time she had asked about the neighborhood, about the property values, about how long I had lived here, and I had answered pleasantly because she was sitting at my table and I had raised my son to bring people home who were welcomed. She never does. I thought about Kevin at 7 years old on the kitchen floor, finding a melody with one hand on the small keyboard. I thought about the letter I had written him when he moved into his first apartment. Eat properly. Call your grandmother. I had meant every word of it. I had meant every meal and every school concert where I scanned the audience for his face, and every evening I had waited up later than I needed to because waiting felt like a form of love. She never does. I pressed my palms flat on the desk the way you press something to keep it from moving. I breathed. I looked at the notepad where I had written the subject line in pressed letters, final asset summary before Q3 transfer. He had a timeline. He had a quarter. He had been managing me the way a person manages a transaction with phases and deadlines and a final piece. I picked up my phone. I called Lynn back. I said, send me all the photographs. Every screen, tonight. She said, Mom, what are you going to do? I looked at the altar room doorway from where I sat. I could see the edge of Min's photograph from this angle. Just the frame. The corner of his smile. I said, what I should have done the day I first saw the letter. Lynn said, I'm coming home. I said, not yet. Stay where you are. I need you where you are right now. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, the way she has said things since she was small, plainly, without decoration. I'm scared, Mom. I said, I know. I said, so are they just don't know it yet. After she hung up, I sat in the dark for a long time with my hands still pressed flat on the desk and the curtains still moving in the draft from Min's window, and the subject line still on my notepad in letters I had pressed too hard. She never does. I had taught music for 35 years. I had spent my life teaching children to hear the difference between a note played correctly and a note played almost correctly. The difference was small. The difference was everything. They had planned this carefully. They had left a record of it, in their own words, in their own names, sent from their own devices, stored on a server somewhere that did not know and did not care what the messages contained. They had been so certain I would not look. I reached for my reading glasses. I began to read. I have always been an early riser. This goes back further than retirement, further than teaching, further than the years of early mornings getting children ready for school while Min made coffee and the house came slowly to life around us. It goes back to my own childhood, to my mother moving through the kitchen before dawn, to the particular quality of light at 5 in the morning that has always felt to me like the most honest part of the day before the noise begins, before other people's urgency fills the air, when the mind is clear and the world has not yet made its demands. I rose at 5 the morning after Lin's call. I did not feel like sleeping. I had slept 4 hours, and they had been sufficient. I made coffee, strong, the way Min used to tease me about enough to stand a spoon in, he said, and I said that was the point. I carried the cup to my desk, and I sat down and I opened the folder I had been building. It had grown considerably in the past 2 weeks. I am a methodical person. This is not a personality trait I arrived at by accident. 35 years of teaching means 35 years of lesson plans, recital programs, student progress records, parent communication logs. You learn to document because documentation is what survives disagreement. When a parent insists their child has been practicing every day, you show them the progress record. When an administrator questions your methods, you show them the results. Paper outlasts memory. Paper does not become uncertain under pressure. I had applied this principle to the folder. In the left section, the Meridian Pacific letter confirming the unauthorized beneficiary change. The savings account screenshot. The insurance policy contact field change. The certificate of deposit withdrawal record, each document in a clear sleeve, dated in the upper right corner, in my own handwriting. In the right section, the photographs Lin had sent. 17 email screenshots, printed at the internet cafe the previous afternoon, each one with the date, sender, and recipient visible. I had printed them twice, one set for the folder, one set in an envelope I had sealed and addressed to Gerald Tran and placed in my desk drawer. In the center, the original beneficiary designation form from 2019, my signature, Gerald's witness signature, Lin's name in the primary beneficiary line. I had placed it in the heaviest sleeve I owned, the kind meant for documents you intend to last. I looked at all of it spread across my desk in the early morning light. Then I began to make a list. The list was not of grievances. I was not interested in cataloging what had been done to me. The list was of actions specific, sequenced, each one dependent on the one before it, each one designed to close an exit before the people inside the room understood the room was closing. First, Gerald. I needed him confirmed, not just willing. I needed to know that when the moment came he would be present, in a room, with his copy of the witness form and his clear memory of a Saturday afternoon in 2019. I would call him that morning. I would ask him to keep both the copy and his calendar open. Second, the pension administrator at the school district. I had not yet contacted the district's retirement office directly. The 401k through the district used a different system from Meridian, older, slower, more procedural. I needed to call them and verify the current beneficiary on record. I needed to understand whether any change had been attempted through their system and failed, or whether Kevin had simply not reached it yet. Third, a lawyer. Not a family friend, not someone who had known Kevin since he was young, a professional I had no prior connection to, someone who would look at the folder and see only what was in it. I had the name of a firm from the homeowner's insurance paperwork, a legal firm listed as the district's authorized representative in property disputes. I did not need them for the same purpose, but a firm that handled institutional property matters would understand financial documentation. Fourth, Lin. I needed her to stay in Oregon until I was ready. She wanted to come home. I understood this. But Lin coming home meant Kevin and Stephanie would know something had changed. The value of what I was preparing depended entirely on their continued certainty that I did not know what they knew. She never does. I wrote that phrase at the bottom of the list and looked at it for a moment. Then I crossed it out. Not because it wasn't useful, it was, as a reminder of exactly how wide they had left the door open, but because I did not need it on a list to remember it. It was already part of me now, the way a piece of music becomes part of you after you have played it enough times. You no longer read the notes, you simply play. I called Gerald at 7:30. He answered promptly. I told him I needed him to hold the third Saturday of the month. I told him I was assembling something, and when it was assembled, I would need him to come and sit in a room and say what he knew. He asked, "What kind of room?" I said, "The kind where what you say becomes a matter of record." He was quiet for a moment. Then he said he would hold the date. I called the district pension office at 9 when they opened. I gave my account information to the administrator who answered. A woman with a patient voice and the practiced efficiency of someone who answers the same questions many times a day. I asked her to verify the current beneficiary designation on my account. She verified it. Lynn's name, unchanged. I thanked her. I asked her to note in my file that I was requesting enhanced verification on any future changes, that any request to alter beneficiary information on my account must be confirmed by a phone call to my personal number before processing. She said she could add a notation. She said it was not standard procedure, but it was permitted. I said, "Please add it today." She said she would. I hung up and sat for a moment, with the particular feeling of a door being locked from the inside. A small sound. Significant. In the afternoon, I walked to the law firm I had identified. It was a 20-minute walk, which I preferred to taking the motorbike because 20 minutes of walking gives the mind time to settle into its own order. The city moved around me, the motorbikes, the vendors, the particular smell of the street near the market where someone was always frying something, and the oil reached you half a block before the stall did. I have walked these streets for 30 years. They are as familiar to me as the hallways of my own house. The lawyer was a woman named Thao, perhaps 40, with the direct manner of someone who charges by the hour and respects people who come prepared. I set the folder on her desk. I told her what I needed: a professional review of the documents, a formal letter of dispute to be sent to all 3 financial institutions on legal letterhead, and her presence at a meeting on the third Saturday of the month. She looked through the folder without speaking. She read the email screenshots. She read the Meridian letter. She looked at the original beneficiary form for a long time. Then she looked at me. She said, "You have documented this very thoroughly." I said, "I have had 35 years of practice." She said she could prepare the dispute letters by Thursday. She said the meeting could be arranged. She asked who else would be present. I told her. She wrote down the names without reacting. When I said Kevin Nguyen, she did not look up. When I said Stephanie Marsh, she did not look up. She wrote both names the way she wrote everything as facts, which is all they were. I paid her retainer from the envelope in my purse that I had brought specifically for this purpose, counted out the night before at my desk after everyone else in the neighborhood was asleep. On the walk home, the evening light came down through the trees at the angle it always does at that hour, going golden and long, the kind of light that makes even ordinary streets look like something worth remembering. I walked slowly. I was not in a hurry. Everything was in place. The third Saturday of the month was 9 days away. Kevin and Stephanie did not know I had been anywhere or done anything. In 9 days, they would walk into a room expecting to find the woman they had always found quiet, accommodating, not quite understanding. They would not find that woman. They would find everything she had been building while they thought she was simply waiting. The evening settled around me as I turned into my street, and the marigolds along the back fence were orange in the last of the light, and I walked through my own gate and closed it behind me. 9 days. I set the meeting for 10 o'clock on a Saturday morning. I chose Saturday deliberately. Kevin did not work on Saturdays. Stephanie showed properties on Saturday afternoons, but kept her mornings free. I had learned this over months of Sunday dinners where she mentioned her schedule with the frequency of someone who wanted you to understand how in demand she was. 10 o'clock gave them no excuse. It gave them no time to prepare, because the invitation I sent through Thao's office said only that there were documents requiring their signatures in relation to my estate, and that their presence was requested at the law firm's conference room at 10 on the third Saturday of the month. Kevin called me that Thursday evening. He said, "Mom, what is this about? What documents?" I said, "The lawyer will explain everything when you arrive." He said, "Can't you just tell me now?" I said, "I'll see you Saturday." I hung up before he could ask again. I arrived at Thao's office at 9:30. Gerald was already there. sitting in one of the chairs along the wall with his hands on his knees and his copy of the witness form in a manila envelope on the seat beside him. He stood when I came in, and we did not say much to each other. There was nothing that needed saying. We had known each other long enough that presence was its own communication. Thao met me at the door to the conference room. She had arranged the table the way I had asked. Documents at her end, chairs on both sides, a water carafe in the center that no one would drink from. The dispute letters she had sent to all 3 financial institutions were in a stack to her left, each one bearing the institutional response. She had received 2 confirming that the unauthorized changes had been flagged and frozen, pending investigation, 1 still outstanding. The email screenshots Lin had photographed were in a separate folder, already numbered as exhibits. The original beneficiary designation form, in its heavy sleeve, was in the center of the table. I sat with my back to the window. The light came in from behind me, which was not an accident. Kevin and Stephanie arrived at 10:04. I heard them before I saw them, Kevin's voice in the reception area, polite, but edged with the specific impatience of a man who has decided this is an inconvenience he is managing rather than a situation he should be concerned about. Stephanie's heels on the tile floor. Then the conference room door opened and they came in, and Kevin saw Gerald first, and something shifted in his face, a small movement, quickly controlled, the kind of thing you would miss if you were not watching for it. I was watching for it. They sat across from Thao and me. Stephanie set her purse on the table, the same way she had set her folder on my couch that Saturday morning with the consultant, efficiently, territorially, as though space claimed was ground held. Kevin looked at the documents in front of Thao. Then he looked at me. He said, "Mom, what is this?" I said, "Let the lawyer explain." "That's what she's here for," Thao began. She did not raise her voice. She did not editorialize. She laid out the facts in the sequence they had occurred, referencing each document as she named it: the unauthorized beneficiary change on the Meridian account, the savings account alteration, the insurance policy contact modification, the certificate of deposit withdrawal. She slid each institutional response across the table as she named it, face up, so that Kevin could read the words "frozen pending investigation" in the letterhead of his own bank. Stephanie's hand on her purse did not move. Kevin said, "There must be a misunderstanding. I was trying to help." "Mom asked me to," Thao said. "Mrs. Nguyen has provided a formal statement that she made no such request. She has also provided documentation." She slid the folder of email screenshots across the table. These were obtained from a device you left accessible in her home. The color left Kevin's face the way heat leaves a room when a window is opened quickly, completely, and all at once. Stephanie looked at the folder. She did not open it. She did not need to. She knew what was in it. She had written half of it. Then Thao looked at Gerald. She said, "Mr. Tran, can you identify this document?" She placed the original beneficiary designation form in the center of the table, still in its heavy sleeve. Gerald leaned forward. He looked at it for a moment, though he did not need to look long, because he had looked at it already, in his own kitchen, and he knew every line of it. He said, "Yes, this is the beneficiary designation form for Mrs. Nguyen's 401k retirement account through the Westfield Unified School District. I witnessed her signature on this document in her kitchen on a Saturday afternoon in March of 2019. The primary beneficiary listed is her daughter, Lan Nguyen. I signed as witness. That is my signature." He tapped the form once, lightly, with one finger. He said, "I watched her sign it. I know what her signature looks like." The signature on the form submitted to Meridian Pacific Financial Services is not the same signature, Kevin said. "That's you can't just." Gerald looked at him. Gerald had been a bank branch manager for 30 years. He had sat across tables from people who were not telling the truth for 30 years. He simply looked at Kevin with the expression of a man who has heard many incomplete sentences and does not feel the need to help finish them. Kevin stopped talking. Stephanie spoke then, for the first time since sitting down. Her voice was careful, measured, the voice she used at Sunday dinners when she was deciding how to present something. She said, Kevin was trying to protect his mother's assets. His intentions were, Thao said, The institutions involved have flagged these changes as potentially fraudulent. The concern is not intention. The concern is authorization. Mrs. Nguyen did not authorize these changes. She has documentation supporting that. You have documentation, she nodded toward the email folder supporting that as well. Stephanie's mouth closed. I looked at her across the table, her pale green dress, different from the one she had worn on the Saturday with the consultant, but the same quality, the same careful selection, her hand still on her purse. Her eyes doing what they always did, moving, calculating, looking for the angle that remained open. I thought about her words in Kevin's email, she never does. I reached into my own folder, and I placed one more document on the table. It was a single page. A printed copy of the email thread, the final exchange, the one Lynn had photographed last. I turned it so that it faced Kevin and Stephanie. I did not need to point to any particular line. The line was visible from where they sat. The font was large enough to read without leaning forward, though Stephanie leaned forward anyway, as if she needed to confirm what she already knew was there. She never does. Kevin looked at the page. Then he looked at me. I said, quietly, without heat, I have kept every piece of paperwork related to this family's finances since the day your father and I signed our first lease together in 1988. I filed the original beneficiary form when the district enrolled me in the retirement plan. I updated it when your father died. With a witness, in my own kitchen, I kept the copy in a box under your father's altar, where it has been for 4 years, exactly where I put it. I let that sit for a moment. Then I said, you told each other I wouldn't understand the paperwork. Kevin did not speak. I said, I wrote the paperwork. The conference room was very quiet. The water carafe caught the light from the window behind me and threw a small wavering reflection across the ceiling, and outside the city moved the way it always did, indifferent and continuous. And inside this room my son sat across from me with the printed evidence of his own words in front of him and nothing left to say. Thou said, we will now discuss the path forward. I folded my hands on the table. I was ready to discuss. Thou gave them 20 minutes to confer privately. This was standard procedure, she said, in matters where multiple parties were present and documentation had been introduced. She said it the way she said everything factually, without inflection, giving nothing away about what she expected them to do with those 20 minutes. She and I stepped into her office down the hall and she poured 2 glasses of water and we sat without speaking while the clock on her wall moved its hands in their usual indifferent way. Gerald waited in the reception area. I had seen him settle back into his chair with the ease of a man who has waited out many difficult silences and knows that patience is not passivity, it is simply another form of preparation. I drank the water. I looked at Thau's diplomas on the wall above her desk, the small potted plant on the windowsill that needed water, the stack of folders beside her keyboard that represented other people's complications. I thought about nothing in particular, which is what I do when I am waiting for something I have already finished preparing for. The 20 minutes passed. Thau's assistant knocked and said they were ready. We returned to the conference room to find that something had broken open between them in our absence. I did not know what had been said. I would not know for some time. But the room had changed in the way a room changes when 2 people who have been presenting a unified position have stopped presenting it. Something in the air, something in the arrangement of their bodies. Stephanie was sitting further from Kevin than she had been. Her purse was on her lap now rather than on the table. Kevin's hands were in front of him, fingers pressed together, and he was looking at the surface of the table rather than at the door when we came in. Thau sat? I sat. Stephanie spoke first. She said, I want it noted that the beneficiary changes were Kevin's idea. Kevin's head came up. She said it again, more clearly, with the precise diction of someone who has decided that precision is now the only form of protection available to her. The initial contact with Meridian Pacific Financial Services was made by Kevin using information from his mother's accounts. I provided advice on which accounts were less likely to generate immediate alerts, but the decision to proceed and the submission of the forms were his actions. Kevin said her name. Once. The way you say a name when you cannot yet believe what is attached to it. She said, I'm not going to absorb consequences for decisions I didn't make unilaterally. He said, you wrote the emails. You calculated the figures. You identified the accounts. She said, I was advising you. I'm a real estate professional. I understand asset valuation. You asked for my analysis, and I provided it. What you did with that analysis was your choice. I sat with my hands folded and watched. This is the thing about people who plan together for selfish reasons. The plan holds as long as the outcome they planned for still seems achievable. The moment the outcome becomes a liability rather than a prize, the plan becomes evidence, and evidence is something everyone wants to be the last person holding. Kevin turned to Thao. He said, "She suggested the approach with the savings account specifically. She knew about the notification thresholds because she has handled estate sales where beneficiary changes were involved. She brought that knowledge to this." Thao wrote something on her notepad without looking up. Stephanie said, "I brought professional knowledge to a conversation. I didn't forge anyone's signature." Kevin said, "We both knew what we were doing." Stephanie said, "Speak for yourself." He looked at her. "I have sat across from people in difficult moments for 68 years, students who didn't want to perform, parents who didn't want to hear the truth, administrators who didn't want to change their minds, and I have learned to read the specific quality of silence that follows a betrayal that cannot be unsaid." Kevin's silence, after those 3 words, had that quality. It was the silence of a man watching a door close that he had not known was the last one. He said, quietly, "You told me this was the practical solution. You said it was what people do when family members aren't capable of managing their own affairs." Stephanie's jaw tightened. Kevin said, "You used that exact phrase, not capable of managing their own affairs." He looked at me then, for the first time since Thao had begun presenting the documentation. Not the way he had looked at me during those Saturday visits, with the arranged patience of a man managing a situation. He looked at me the way he had looked at me when he was 19, and had done something he couldn't undo and knew it. Not with shame, exactly. With the particular expression of someone confronting the distance between who they intended to be and what they had actually done. I did not look away. I did not soften my expression, but I did not harden it either. I simply looked back at him the way I had always looked at students who had made a genuine mistake rather than a careless one, with the full attention of someone who understands that this moment matters. He said, "I told myself it was practical. I told myself you had more than you needed, and we had nothing, and it was practical." Stephanie said his name sharply. He said, "She already has the emails. She already has everything." He was right. She already had everything. Thao put down her pen. She said, "At this point, I am required to inform both of you that the documentation Mrs. Nguyen has provided is sufficient to support a formal fraud complaint to the relevant financial institutions and, if she chooses, to law enforcement. The dispute letters already submitted have initiated institutional review processes that will proceed independently of any agreement reached in this room today. What happens in this room affects only what Mrs. Nguyen chooses to pursue beyond those institutional processes." She looked at them both. She said, "Mrs. Nguyen has indicated she is open to a resolution that does not involve a formal criminal complaint, provided certain conditions are met." Kevin looked at me. He said, "What conditions?" I had written them out the evening before, at my desk, in the clear early morning hours when the language came precisely. Thao slid the single page across the table. The conditions were these: full written acknowledgement, signed and notarized, of the unauthorized changes and the means by which they were made. Restitution of the withdrawn certificate of deposit funds within 30 days. Permanent removal of both names from any beneficiary or contact field on any account associated with me. A legal agreement that any future contest of my estate would be forfeit. And one more condition, which I had added last, which was not financial. Kevin read it. His expression shifted. The condition was this: Kevin would write a letter, personally, to his sister Lynn, explaining what he had done and why, without minimizing either. Not for legal purposes. Not for the record. Because Lynn had been named in his scheme as a beneficiary to be displaced, and she deserved to hear from him directly what that had meant. He said, "That's not a legal condition." I said, "No, it isn't." He was quiet. Stephanie pushed her copy of the conditions back across the table toward Thao without speaking. Her eyes were dry. Her posture was composed. She had made her calculation and arrived at the side of the table she had decided to stand on, and she would carry herself from this room with the kind of dignity that has nothing underneath it. I felt nothing particular about her in that moment. She had come into my house and sat at my table, and eaten my food and looked at my husband's altar with her arranged expression, and she had done what she had done, and now she was doing what she was doing, and none of it surprised me. Kevin was the one I was watching. He picked up the pen Thao had placed beside the conditions. He did not sign immediately. He sat with the pen in his hand for a long moment, and he looked at the page, and then he looked at me, and he said, "You knew. You knew the whole time we came over. The Sunday dinners, the Saturday with the consultant. You knew." I said, "I knew enough." He said, "Why didn't you just—" He stopped. He didn't finish the question, perhaps because the end of it was too revealing. "Why didn't you just tell me? Why didn't you just confront me? Why didn't you just act like someone who didn't understand?" I said, "Because you told each other I wouldn't." He looked down at the page. He signed. The restitution came on a Thursday. A bank transfer, precise to the cent, the full amount of what had been withdrawn from the certificate of deposit. Thao sent me a confirmation by email, and I printed it and placed it in the folder, which I then closed with the rubber band I had been using since the beginning, and put on the shelf above my desk where I keep things that are finished. I did not celebrate. I made coffee, and I stood at the kitchen window and I watched the alley the way I have watched it for 31 years. The marigolds still there along the wall, the morning light doing what morning light does in this city when the air is clear and the day has not yet decided to be difficult. The accounts were restored. The beneficiary designations were corrected. Lin's name was back in the primary line of the 401k, where it had always been, where I had always intended it to be. The institutional review processes had closed, satisfied, their letters filed at the back of the folder behind everything else. The house was mine. It had always been mine. But there is a difference between a thing being true and a thing being established. And now it was both. Lin came home the following weekend. She arrived on a Friday evening with a bag too large for a 2-day visit, which told me she was planning to stay longer regardless of what she said about her schedule, and I did not comment on this because I did not want her to leave sooner than she intended. She set her bag down in the back bedroom and came to the kitchen and stood in the doorway for a moment, looking at me the way she has looked at me since she was small, with the particular attention of a person who is checking something important without wanting to appear to be checking it. I was making soup. I told her to sit down. She sat at the kitchen table and watched me cook the way she used to watch me practice piano quietly, not interrupting, storing the sounds and the movements for later the way children store things they don't yet have words for. We ate. We talked about her work, her apartment in Oregon, a friend of hers whose name I recognized. We did not talk about Kevin, not that evening. There was time, and the soup was good, and some conversations should not be rushed into ahead of the meal that precedes them. After dinner, I brought the folder from the shelf and set it on the table between us. I told her to take it. She looked at me. I said, "This is yours. The documentation, the correspondence, the confirmation letters. Keep it where you can find it. Not because you will need it, I believe you will not need it, but because you should know the full shape of what happened and what was done to protect what is yours." She picked up the folder. She held it for a moment without opening it. She said, "Mom." I said, "Don't make it large. It was paperwork." She laughed, a small sound, the kind that has tears in the vicinity but is choosing not to go there. She said, "It was not just paperwork." I said, "No, but the paperwork is what made it real, in the room where it needed to be real." She put the folder in her bag. She zipped it closed. She looked at me with the expression she has worn all her life when she has more to say than she is going to say, which has always been one of the things I love most about her, that she knows how to hold things carefully. On Saturday morning I went to the altar room. I lit incense. The smoke rose in the particular way it rises in that room, slowly, bending at the same place near the ceiling where there is always a slight draft from the window Min did not quite seal when he replaced the frame. I have considered sealing it properly for 4 years. I no longer think I will. I looked at Min's photograph. The gap between his teeth. The laugh directed at something off to the left, something I had not seen and would not see now, something that belonged to that afternoon and to him. I told him what had happened. Not in words, I have never been the kind of woman who speaks aloud to photographs. But I stood there in front of him and I let him know, in the way you let someone know who has been with you long enough that words are a secondary language. I told him, the box did what it was for. The metal box was back under the altar table, behind his photograph, behind the brass incense holder his mother had given us at our wedding. The original form was inside it. It had done its work and returned to its place. This seemed right to me. Some things are not trophies. They are simply tools that become necessary and then become quiet again. The letter Kevin had agreed to write arrived on a Tuesday, 3 weeks after the meeting at Thau's office. It was addressed to Lynn. She called me after she read it. She did not tell me everything it said. I did not ask. That letter was between them, as I had intended it to be, and what it contained was for her to hold or release according to what she needed. She said only, he explained it. He didn't excuse it. I said, that was the condition. She said, it doesn't fix anything. I said, no, it's not meant to fix anything. It's meant to be true. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, do you think you'll ever? She stopped. I said, I don't know. That's the honest answer. And it was. I did not know what the coming years would require of me in relation to my son. I did not know whether what had been broken could become something usable in a different form, the way a cracked pot can hold dry things even if it no longer holds water. I did not know, and I had decided that not knowing was an acceptable place to stand for now, because some questions answer themselves more honestly when you stop pressing them for an answer. That afternoon I sat at the upright piano in the front room. I had not played in several weeks. The keys were slightly dusty, which I noticed but did not stop to address. I played scales first, the way I always begin, not because I need to warm my hands, but because scales are an honest beginning, without pretension, without any demand that they be beautiful before they are accurate. Then I played something I had not played in years, a piece I had learned at 20 and taught to dozens of students afterward. One of those pieces that lives in the hands, without requiring the mind to retrieve it. Lynn came to the doorway. She did not interrupt. She stood there the way she had stood in the kitchen doorway the evening before, simply present, simply watching. I finished the piece. I sat for a moment with my hands on the keys. Outside, the afternoon light was doing its specific thing in the alley, going golden and long against the wall where the marigolds grew. The marigolds that came back every year without being asked, from the root Min had planted because I had admired them somewhere, and he had simply, without ceremony, made them mine. Lynn said, play another one. I did. My mother used to say that still water does not mean shallow water. She said it to me when I was young and too quick to show what I knew. She said it the year my husband died and I did not cry at the funeral, and the neighbors whispered. She said it the first time I stood in front of a classroom of children who did not want to learn and had to decide whether to be smaller or to simply wait. I had thought of it in my kitchen the night the first letter came. I had thought of it in Gerald's kitchen, in Thau's office, in the conference room with my son's face across the table and his name on a document he had signed. I thought of it now, with my hands on the piano keys, and the light coming through the window, and my daughter in the doorway and the metal box back under the altar where it belonged. Still water. Not because there is nothing beneath it. Because what is beneath it has been there long enough to know, it does not need to announce itself. To every parent who has ever been talked over, signed around, or quietly pushed aside by the people they gave everything to, your silence was never weakness. Sometimes the ones who say the least have kept the most. And when the moment comes, a single piece of paper, held in the right hands, can say everything that needed to be said. If this story moved you, please like this video and subscribe. There are more stories like Lan's waiting, and we tell every one of them to the end. We'd love to hear from you in the comments. Did you believe Lan would win from the very beginning, or was there a moment when you weren't sure she'd make it?